Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. We've made it. It's opening night. The Timberwolves take on the Oklahoma City Thunder this evening, the home opener, the season opener. It's all happening. We will preview that matchup tonight. And before we get to that, though, I do want to talk about some predictions, a couple bold, a couple maybe not so bold, but my predictions for this season. We'll revisit the win total prediction I made on Tuesday as well. It's all coming up on the show here today. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Hump Day and happy opening night. Happy Timberwolves game day. There's a lot going on. First of all, big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, you can find this show free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken, and that's with two B's, two E's, CKEN. Also, a reminder, the brand new Locked On Sports Minnesota app is available now on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Wolves, plus all the other Minnesota-based podcasts are available on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. More great local sports coverage 24/7. It's absolutely free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today. Again, that's Roku or Amazon Fire TV. All right, a lot to get to today. I want to close with the Wolves Thunder preview. I mean, it's been a minute since we've done any sort of a game preview, an update on what's up with the Thunder, what the Wolves did against Oklahoma City last year, and what you might be able to expect in this one. Based on last season's matchups, the Wolves did beat OKC all four times they played last season. And of course, the Thunder are expected to be one of the worst teams in the league, but we'll preview that here at the end of the show. I want to start, though, with some predictions for this season. If you missed Tuesday's show, please go back and listen to it. I made my win total prediction for the Wolves and where I think they'll finish in the West. I gave some reasoning behind it. So I'll say it now if you missed it, but please go listen to it, because if you just kind of look at some of the projection models, you read the ESPN forecast, you go to 538.com, or you look at the lines, like at Bet Online, it's 48.5 for the Wolves win total. Everybody's kind of got them between 46 and 49 wins. And I went with 52 wins for my prediction. I think they'll be fourth in the West. And I give kind of a full reasoning and support for that projection that I made on Tuesday's show. And the cliff notes are basically, there's a lot of things that can't be measured by projections. You know, you send out a couple really good advanced stat darlings and you bring in one in Rudy Gobert. It's not a wash, right? Because Rudy also is a better basketball fit and a better, I guess, fill in or raises the bar with some of the Wolves' weaknesses from a year ago in ways that aren't going to be measured by a traditional projection model. So I talk all about that on Tuesday's show. Please go listen to it. I want to make a couple additional predictions today. First of all, I want to start with this. Well, actually, here's one that's maybe not particularly bold, but I want to put this out there. I think Anthony Edwards, well, I don't know, it's somewhat bold. I think Anthony Edwards will make the All-Star team this year. Now, there hasn't been as much Ant talk in preseason because, frankly, he hasn't played well in preseason. He's actually played, I think, in every preseason game, and just didn't really have, I think he had like one okay performance, but was really kind of disappointing. So we haven't been talking as much about him. It's all about the Rudy Cat fit. It's about, how's D'Lo going to play in his contract year? How's Jaden McDaniels fitting into the starting lineup? And suddenly the Ant conversation kind of has gone by the wayside locally and nationally. Nobody's really talking about him, but I've said before, I said this on Locked On NBA on Monday when I was on with Jackson, the host of Locked On NBA, and I said this, I think, last week on Locked On Wolves, is if Ant can make a John Morant-like jump in his year 3 season, which is this one, coming into this season, I mean, obviously, if he makes a John Morant-like jump, he's a top 10 player. But if you go back and compare the first 2 seasons of Ja's career and the first 2 seasons of Ant's career, now Ja's going into year 4, compare their first 2 seasons, it's really similar. And obviously they're different players. Ant's already a better defender. He's already a better outside shooter, but Ja's far better in the paint. The first 2 seasons are eerily similar. And you look at what Ja did last year, and obviously he got hurt. He played less games last season than he did in his first couple of years. The improvement was really tangible. And obviously Memphis was fantastic with and without Ja available. And but it's very measurable to see what Morant improved at from year one and two together going into year three. And if Ant does anything like what Ja did last year in terms of improvement, obviously that makes him an all-star. It probably makes him in the MVP conversation. John Morant was in that conversation last year for a long time, except for obviously it somewhat ironically hurt his case when his team played so well with him off the floor, or with him, I should say, with him out with the injury. That spoke more, of course, to Memphis's depth and the coaching job and some of those different things than I think it did. I don't think it means that John Morant's not as good as we think he is. But if Ant can do something like what Ja did from year 2 to year 3, then he's an all-star. He competes for an all-NBA third-team spot, and the Timberwolves are almost surely a 50-plus win team. I think if he plays like Ja did last year, they will be a 50-plus win team, provided Rudy and Kat do what we expect them to do and be all-stars themselves or on the in that conversation. That would mean the Wolves have 3 all-stars. They would have at least 2 all-NBA players. And I think it's entirely on the table. I think the continued defensive improvement is real. And as long as that, again, continues, if it could stay on the floor, foul trouble, injuries, all that stuff. Shot selection is the biggest thing. We talked about this in light of the preseason. There were some possessions where Ant he looked kind of lost. Like, hey, do I force this here? Do I shoot the jumper? Not lost. Lost isn't the right word, but not going to the basket as much. And maybe it's because it's preseason. I don't know. But we saw this last season where Ant would occasionally go through these ruts where he just wasn't putting the ball on the floor and being ultra aggressive going to the rim. He falls into the trap of the step back jumpers, which he's good at shooting, the pull up jumpers in transition, which he's very good at shooting. And he'd be better served to just continue going to the rim when at all possible. And I would imagine he gets jaded, and understandably so, if he's not getting these calls in the paint. He's going to get more of them as he gets bigger, as he gets stronger, which he has. He's grown. Year 1 to year 2, he literally got taller. He's put on reportedly 10, 15 pounds of muscle. He looks, visually, you can tell he's bigger now. And then also, fair or unfair, and frankly unfair, year 3, you're going to start to get more calls than you do in your first 2 years. I don't care what the NBA and the officials say. I mean, that's just part of it, right? You're going to get more calls the longer you've been in the league, the longer you can show like, hey, this is the level of player I am. Give me these calls. He's going to get more of those calls. And so that's all going to add up to help to make him, I think, the Wolves' most improved player this year. He'll be in the conversation for most improved player league-wide. There's kind of this conversation every year of like, do we give this to somebody who's a bench player that becomes a starter, or, somebody who unexpectedly took a leap this year, or somebody who simply went from good to great? We've seen the good to great thing very recently, right? And I think that's on the table for Ant this year. I think that's entirely possible. Or, who knows? Maybe it's tricky with higher usage guys around him like D'Lo and Cat and also Rudy Gobert now. Maybe that's a tougher kind of needle to thread where you get the ball enough to still be most improved and be on a team that's hopefully one of the top 4 teams in the Western Conference. We'll see how that all turns out. But that's my prediction for Ant. I have one other pretty major prediction, and this one's a little bit more bold. I want to spend our next few minutes talking about that, give some context to it, and then we'll close the show with the Oklahoma City Thunder preview. So we'll do that here next. First, though, let's talk about our friends, our title sponsors of today's show, and that is, of course, Prize Picks. Tonight, Wednesday, is the first Timberwolves game of the season. I think I'm going to take Karl-Anthony Towns over on points. I think that he's ready to I know things look clunky last Friday night when Towns and Gobert played together, but I think he's going to want to make a statement. The Thunder are a good team to do it against. Hopefully he plays enough minutes. If it's enough of a blowout, I guess he wouldn't. But I think I'm going to take Towns over on points. You could also go over to the Oklahoma City Thunder and take, I don't know, Lou Dort under on rebounds or whatever. You can also cross sports if you want to go play at Prize Picks. You could take the Towns points over. You could take the D'Lo points over. You could take the Dort rebounds under. Whatever you want to do. You could also, like, say it's a Thursday and there's Thursday night football. You could do a football over under pick plus a Timberwolves or an NBA over under pick at Prize Picks. It's the absolute best thing about it is that you can go cross sports. It's super easy to play. Let me tell you a little bit about it. So you pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You don't compete against other people. It's just you versus those projections, the over-under numbers. It's fantastic. There's no like pro gamblers that you're going against or anything like that. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That includes, of course, the NBA, as well as NFL, MLB, NHL, golf, college sports, soccer, you name it. It's available. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's super easy, safe and fast withdrawals, and it's currently operational. PrizePicks is in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. Again, if you deposit $100, I'll say this a different way. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, they'll give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Thanks again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen today. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Of course, the season kicked off, the NBA season kicked off on Tuesday night with a pair of games. You can check out Game to Game now. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Okay. Let's talk another. I would say this is a bolder prediction even than the Ant one. Here it is. I think the Timberwolves will finish with both a top 5 defense and a top 5 offense, according to essentially offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency, or offensive rating. There's obviously different sites calculate this in different ways. NBA.com and Basketball Reference, for instance, have a couple different ways to calculate this. I usually use Basketball Reference for this stat. But I think the Wolves will finish with a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense. Now, last season, only 2 teams did that in the entire league. Phoenix did it, and Memphis did it. Boston was close. I think they were like 7th, maybe defensively and 2nd offensively. Boston was close, but only Phoenix and Memphis managed to do it. Last year, the Wolves were top 10 in offense. They were like 14th in defense, according to Basketball Reference. I think the Wolves will improve their offense based from where it was last year, which was still a top 10 offense. I think it was 8th or 9th, according to Basketball Reference. And I think the defense will improve from 14th to the top 5. Here's why. First of all, the offense. I think it will be a rocky start. I don't think there's any question about that. I think Friday was a good indicator of that. However, the soft schedule to start is going to allow them to kind of, win some games while they figure it out, gain some confidence in the system. And then obviously you're going to run into some bumps against, the like in 2 weeks when they play Phoenix, like that's going to be rough. And then they go on the road and they play some other really good teams. They play like 5 out of 6 on the road in early November. But I think that the soft schedule to start will help them, again, gain some confidence, gain some momentum when it comes to the offense. And I think that'll really get them off to a good start. I also think that D'Lo is going to have a fantastic year. It's a contract year. He's trying to get an extension from the Wolves. If he doesn't, he's going to hit the open market. And, it's not out of the question. Somebody could say like, hey, D'Lo had a monster year. Let's give him a max deal, right? He's kind of in the middle of his prime years athletically. There's a chance that could happen. So if D'Lo thinks there's max money on the table, plus you pair him, one of the best pick and roll ball handlers in D'Lo in the league, you pair him with arguably the best roll man in the league in Rudy Gobert, the Timberwolves pick and roll offense should be absolutely dynamic. And again, there's wrinkles to figure out, right? There's the Cat and Rudy playing together, who's rolling, who's popping, or can you add wrinkles, I guess, to use wrinkles in a different way, to those sets so that it's not so predictable. What all those things together, combined with D'Lo's incentive to be really good this year, and on the verge of a breakout, as we talked about earlier on the show today, and a strong bench with guys that can do multiple things. Jalen Noel, instant offense. Some guys who could provide, Bryn Forbes, if he gets into the rotation, providing some shooting. I just think this is a well-rounded team that's very deep, and the offensive possibilities are absolutely endless. We talked about this a lot this offseason, is just how creative Chris Finch has been over the course of his career as an assistant and as a head coach, as an offensive coordinator in various stops, especially Denver and New Orleans with talented bigs, playing multiple bigs at once. Once this team figures it out, and hopefully the soft schedule accelerates that timeline, this offense is going to be absolutely dynamic. And I think it will be a top 5 offense. In terms of the defense, Rudy Gobert was the Utah Jazz were a top 10 defense every single year except for one. I think it was 7 out of 8 seasons when Rudy Gobert, throughout his rookie year when he was a bench player, didn't play all that much. When he became a regular in year 2, for the next 8 seasons, maybe it was 6 out of 7, 6 out of 7 seasons, they were a top 10 defense, including last year. So he is, as we like to say, a walking top 10 defense. The Wolves were 14th last year in defense, so they weren't awful. And obviously you're losing Patrick Beverley. He's a good defender, but you're going to get more Anthony Edwards guarding the ball. And he is a good on-ball defender. Jaden McDaniels is in the starting lineup. Karl-Anthony Towns will be moved to a role where he's not going to be relied upon quite as much. And Rudy's going to clean up everybody's mess. You've also improved the defensive rebounding, which is a massive issue. And that is part of defense. As I like to say on the show, there's only a couple ways you can get the ball back, right? An opponent's made shot, a turnover, or a missed shot on a defensive rebound. There's 3 ways, right? And the Timberwolves were awful at defensive rebounding all season long last year. That really limited what they could do defensively. So if Rudy's rim protection is great, if he's really improving the interior defense, but also the interior, in terms of rebounding on the grabbing balls off the glass and heading back the other way, which springboards transition opportunities, it's easier to run off of misses than it is off of makes in general. Those are all positive things. And also, look at Phoenix, look at Memphis. Those are teams that had weak links defensively as well. Memphis is a really good example. Actually, Phoenix is too. With Devin Booker, Memphis with John Morant, these are teams that had minus defenders on the perimeter. And Utah too. Utah was only, I don't think they weren't top 5 last year. I don't believe, but they were top 10. Let's see. I actually think I have it in front of me, but Utah's another good example. They had no good perimeter defenders last year, really. So you could be a top 5 defense with weak links on the perimeter. And D'Lo is that weak link for the Wolves. Ant, again, on the ball is very good. And Jaden is also good. He hasn't come anywhere near to reaching his potential either. So I would argue that, and here it is. Yeah, Utah was 9th. That was right. Initially, they were 9th last year in defensive rating. So Utah's an example. Memphis is a great example with John Morant. Phoenix is a great example with Devin Booker. You can have a minus defender on the perimeter in your starting lineup if your back end is really strong. And obviously those teams have that. The bigs in Memphis are very good defensively. Jaren Jackson and Steven Adams. So the Timberwolves have the strongest, backline defense of that whole group with Rudy Gobert. He's the best defender. He's the best rebounder of that group of guys between Steven Adams and DeAndre Ayton. And teams that have weak links on the perimeter can still be a good defensive team overall. And Rudy's going to help lock that down for the Wolves this year. So I think the Timberwolves will finish at top 5 in defense, top 5 in offense. I realize that's a bold proclamation. It is a bold prediction, but I think it absolutely can happen. I think it will happen this season. Okay. I want to spend the rest of the show previewing Wolves Thunder, what happened last year between these two teams, and what can we look at in terms of, or what can we expect this season in terms of that matchup. So we're going to do that here next. All right, Timberwolves Thunder, Wednesday night, home opener, season opener. Last season, Oklahoma City was one of the worst teams in the league. I think they will end up being probably the worst team in the West. It all depends really on how much Shai Gilgeous-Alexander plays, but especially with no Chet Holmgren, I think they will be the worst team in the entire Western Conference. The Wolves beat them 4 times last year pretty easily, but the numbers are kind of weird because the Wolves didn't, they essentially gradually, there were a couple games where they basically led wire to wire. There were some that were a little bit more of a struggle till halftime, and then the Wolves pulled away after halftime. So, for instance, the biggest thing in this matchup to me is the Thunder don't have any size, right? Alexei Pokusevski's big, but he's not a center, right? Mike Muscala is not a traditional center. He's kind of been in and out of their lineup the last couple of years. Chet Holmgren won't be on the floor. So this is a Thunder team that's really small. The Timberwolves should dominate them on the glass. They're one of the few teams the Wolves were better than when they matched up against on the glass last year. However, over the course of 4 games, the Timberwolves only out-rebounded Oklahoma City by 11, and they won all 4 of those games. There was one game that was a tie where they each had the same number of rebounds, and then a couple of slight margin games, 2-3 rebounds, then one that was like a 6 or 7 more rebounds. But it was relatively close. Now, part of that is the Wolves made a lot of shots, right? So there were less opportunities to grab offensive rebounds against the Thunder. But in general, you would expect that to be a bigger edge. Part of it's because they were such large blowouts, and the size advantage kind of went away as the Wolves played smaller. Towns wasn't on the floor as much. Towns did play in all 4 games against Oklahoma City last year. Edwards only played in 3 of them, but they each averaged under 30 minutes per game against Oklahoma City because the Wolves got up so quickly in those games. So the size advantage, especially now with Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns at the 4 and Jaden McDaniels full-time at the 3, I mean, the size advantage is massive. And see what I did there? The size advantage is massive. Quite literally, the Timberwolves should have no problem defending the paint, rebounding on both ends of the floor, locking down defensively in the paint, and also on the perimeter for that matter. Especially if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander doesn't play. He didn't play in the preseason, and he is listed as day-to-day. So we'll see if he plays on Wednesday. But either way, the Timberwolves should have no problem locking down the Thunder. Last season, both Karl-Anthony Towns and Jared Vanderbilt had really strong rebounding performances against the Thunder. Of course, Vando is a good rebounder, but undersized. Towns in 4 games and under 30 minutes per game averaged 11 rebounds per game. Vando in 3 games against Oklahoma City averaged 12 rebounds per game. So activity, size, athleticism, those things are the traits that you need to, bury the Thunder on the glass, which absolutely should happen. Also last season, Anthony Edwards did plenty of damage against Oklahoma City. In just 29 minutes per game, he scored 21 points per game, shot 50% from the field and 44% from 3 across those 3 performances against the Thunder. So I expect Ant to do well in this game. Expect the Wolves in general to do well. Again, I think the glass is probably the key. It's an area where they should I guess, gain the most ground against Oklahoma City. Nobody on the Thunder that's still on the roster really was fantastic against the Wolves last season. You go on down the line, and it was pretty meh against the Timberwolves. Lu Dort only played in 1 game against Minnesota. He had some injuries last season. Aaron Wiggins gave them a tough time. He shot 40% from 3 across 3 games and averaged 16 per game. Josh Giddey only played in 2 of the 4 games. He's a ton of fun to watch, and he's going to be, he's going to be a really big part of what Oklahoma City does this year and a big part of their future too. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well from deep, but he was able to kind of do the thing where, he was a triple-double guy last year, right? Against the Wolves, he averaged 12, 10, and 6 across those 2 games, or 12, 10, and 5.5 actually. So, keep an eye out for Giddey. If Gilgeous-Alexander plays, keep an eye out for him. He scored 18 points a game against the Wolves last year, but he was 18% on threes and just 40% from the field. So Minnesota actually did a pretty good job on him. Hopefully, if Jaden McDaniels guards him, Jaden can stay out of foul trouble. Perhaps Ant gets a little bit of a chance, but I would imagine Jaden McDaniels is the first Timberwolves player to get that assignment. But that'll be something to keep an eye out for as well. All things considered, especially at home, the BetOnline line for this one is 10.5 points. The Wolves should win this one by double figures. That would be my prediction, is a double figure win. But remember, things were pretty, pretty gross on Friday offensively for the Wolves with both Rudy and Cat on the floor. So we'll see how things look against the Thunder. This is, again, a team that, defensively should not really provide a whole lot of resistance to the Wolves. And so it's an opponent that the Wolves will have every opportunity to kind of get rolling against, in game 1 of the season. And hopefully that's the case. But remember, the last couple seasons the Wolves have started, I think it was Detroit maybe last year, maybe it was the year before, where I think actually the last 2 years they started at home against Detroit, or there were definitely teams. One year was Detroit, maybe somebody else was the other year. But they were teams the Wolves were favored against, and they won like 95-91, like these close kind of ugly games. And I mean, that might happen here, right? Given what we saw on Friday offensively for the Wolves, if they muck it up and it's just kind of a gross game, but they come out with a relatively comfortable win, I think everybody will be happy. And obviously a win is a win, especially in the season opener. So, I don't think we'll be too upset with any result, provided it is a W for the Wolves. All right. That's all I have for you in the show today. I do want to say, I should have said this off the top, a very special guest tonight on the postcast this season. My guest will be Marnie Gellner from Bally Sports North. Marnie, of course, has done Wolves and Lynx games in a variety of capacities over several years now, and really excited to have her and her expertise and her knowledge on the show post game. 45 minutes following the game, we'll go live, myself and Marnie, to discuss the game that's just finished. We'll go about 10 minutes, and then that will get posted onto YouTube. From there, we'll also do I will do a full post-game podcast, 25 to 30 minutes, a typical pod. That will be Thursday's episode. And then, of course, on Friday, we'll preview Friday night's game as well. So a full, rest of the week of basketball, multiple episodes in a variety of formats upcoming in the next couple of days. So make sure you're following and subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, you can find the show everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms from Apple to Google, Spotify to Odyssey. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. One more place you can watch the show now is the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on either Roku or Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Wolves plus all the other Minnesota Locked On podcasts are available on that app. Again, Roku or Amazon Fire TV. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Podcast Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Thanks again for making this your first listen. A reminder that your second listen can be the Locked On NBA show. The NBA season is here, and our local NBA experts and insiders have you covered on and off the court all season long. All the biggest stories around the NBA every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. I was on the show on Monday talking Rudy and Kat. Go check that out. But there is a show every day, Monday through Friday, on the Locked On NBA feed. It's available on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.